Now, these sentences, suppose they all have the same subject, the same predicate. These different sentence types are clearly related to each other in some sense, right? If we know that a particular A statement is true, that gives us certain implications about the corresponding other statements. These implications are represented really nicely by the square of opposition. Let's go over the square of opposition here. First, notice, top, we've got the universal statements. Bottom, we've got the particular statements. Left, we've got the affirmative statements. Right, we've got the negative statements. Already, we're organizing this material really well. Here's an I statement that I'm sure many of us have been thinking about lately. Some of those who burn crosses are the same who hold office. That one, for instance. Some of those who burn crosses are the same as those who hold office. All right, now let's say that this is a true statement. Seems to be a true statement to me. What would that mean for the corresponding E statement, right? If this is true, what does that tell us about the corresponding E statement? The E statement will say that no cross burners are office holders. Well, if the I statement is true and there's something there, then the E statement that says there's nothing there has to be false. So I and E are related to each other as contradictories, and A and O are related to each other as contradictories. Contradictories are such that if one is true, the other's false. Exactly one of the pair of contradictories is going to be true, and the other is going to be false. Now, this relationship is a really strong relationship. It works even if we're talking about empty categories. This is important. All the other relationships we're about to explicate, contraries, subcontraries, and subalternates, all these other relationships don't hold in empty categories. They only hold when we're talking about categories that have at least one member. So, for instance, all unicorns have horns. All unicorns are horned things. Now, that's true, and that would seem to imply that some unicorns are horned things. But the universal statement is about definitions, and the particular statement is positing that there is one. There is some, at least one. So this relationship, subalternation, it works only when we're talking about categories that have members. It doesn't work when we're thinking in these purely conceptual terms, or we're thinking about things that don't exist but could exist, like unicorns having horns. So we got to watch some of these inferences. Across the middle, the contradictories works even if there are no members of the class. That's good, right? But these others assume existential import. Assume existential import. Existential exists, right? Existential import is assumed whenever you're talking about things that actually exist. If you're not talking about things that actually exist, this is the only relationship we're going to be able to use. All right, so subalternation is a little complicated, right? What happens is, if you have the A statement, you get the I statement for free, but only assuming existential import, right? Only when we're talking about non-empty categories. Because, hey, if there is anything in the S circle at all, then some S are P. But hey, wait, isn't it possible that all S are P and no S are P? That is possible, right? When we're dealing with an empty category, right? All unicorns have horns is true, but it's also true that no unicorns have horns because there are no unicorns, right? So when we're dealing with categories that aren't empty, we can infer validly, this is a good inference, from an I statement that the corresponding, from the A statement that the corresponding I statement is true. If all S are P, and there are any S's at all, then some S are P. And it works the same over here. If there are no S's that are P, unless there's no S's at all, again, we have to assume existential import. If there are no S's that are P, then we get that there's at least one S that's not a P. So if E is true, we get O for free. We can infer O, as long as we're not dealing with empty categories. And if A is true, we can infer I. Now, it doesn't go the other way around. If I know that some of those who hold office are the same who burn crosses, I've got that reversed, that's okay. Some of those who burn crosses are the same as hold office. We can't infer that all of those who burn crosses are the same as hold office. That's not true. We know that's not true. So it doesn't go the other way around. This is why the arrow's going that way. Oddly, though, if it's false, for instance, right? So if we have true here, we can get true here. But it doesn't go the other way around. If we have true here, we can't get to true there. We don't know. That's not enough information for us to know about that. But false climbs up. If I know that the I statement is false, right? It's false that there's some mammal that is also a fish. Then I also know that it's false that all mammals are fish. So from a true A statement, we get a true I statement, but it doesn't go the other way around. We don't get a true I statement leading to a true A statement. Not enough information. But from a false I statement, we get a false A statement, but it doesn't go the other way around. If it's false that all dogs are mammals. No. All dogs are poodles. If it's false that all dogs are poodles, we don't learn that it's false that some dogs are poodles, right? So false climbs up, true passes down. All right, so we've got contradictories across the middle. We've got the subalterns along the sides, the vertical sides. Across the top here, we have contraries. Not contradictories, but contraries. All SRP and no SRP. Hey, they could be false. They could both be false. It could be false that all dogs are poodles and that no dogs are poodles. Hey, look, we found one. It's possible to have an A statement that's false and the corresponding E statement is also false. It happens when some are and some aren't. But what you can't have is a true A statement and a true corresponding E statement when we're assuming existential import. That does happen, of course, when we have an empty category. If there are no S's at all, then yeah, both of these are true. But if there's at least one S and at least one P, if we assume, right, we're not dealing with empty categories, then if we know that all SRP is true, then no SRP has to be false, right? We're never going to have both of these statements be true when we're assuming existential import, when we're dealing with categories that aren't empty. The subcontraries. Also, assuming existential import, right? They can't both be false unless we're dealing with empty categories, right? That's what existential import's doing here, right? They're not both going to be false. It's not going to be false that some dogs are fish and that some dogs are not fish. If there's any such thing as a dog, it's either going to be a fish or not a fish. and for any P. So when we're dealing with categories that have at least one member, these statements, I and O, will not both be false. So if we know that one is false, unless we're dealing with empty categories, we know that the other is true. But if we know one is true, we don't know about the other one. We don't know about the other one just because this is true. So if it's true that some dogs are not fish, we don't know that some are or that none are. It's going to be one of those, but we don't know which. Not enough information. So if we know that one is false, we'll know that the other one's true. But knowing that one's true doesn't guarantee that the other one's false or that the other one's true. It could go either way, undefined. All right, let's make some inferences. Let's use our example. Some of those who burn crosses are the same as those who hold office. Let's say that's true for the sake of argument, because it is. If that's true, what do we learn? What do we learn about the corresponding A, E, and I, this is I, A, E, and O statements? What do we learn about those if our I statement is true? First, the contradictory, right? If I is true, well, E is definitely going to be false, right? That's the contradictory relationship. And that's the only relationship on the board here without an asterisk. The only relationship that would work even if we allow empty categories. All right, so I statement being true, some of those who burn crosses are those who hold office, does imply that the corresponding E statement is false. None of those who hold office are the same as burn crosses. Sorry, I reversed it again. None of those who burn crosses are the same as hold office. When the I statement's true, the E statement is false, even if we're dealing with empty categories. Now, this one doesn't allow us a lot of other inferences, right? Knowing that E is false and knowing that I is true, A might be true and it might be false. We don't know. Not enough information, right? So we'll leave it undefined. Of course, all of those who burn crosses are the same as hold office. I mean, we know not from logic, but from experience that that's not going to be the case. Some of those who burn crosses are not those who hold office. Look, this isn't enough information to get us that, right? And this isn't enough information to get us that. So we leave that undefined too. Now we know one of these has to be true and the other false. And from our experience, I think, obviously there are members, the run-of-the-mill members who aren't holding office, right? Yeah. New exercise. Let's start with an A statement being true. All genocides are ethnic cleansings. I used to use genocide all the time in ethics classes to talk about things that are like obviously bad. I think people don't want me to use that example anymore, but I don't know, this seems like a good one, right? All genocides are ethnic cleansings, right? All of them. And what does this mean? So if the A statement is true, let's start with the O. O is going to be false. Some genocides are not ethnic cleansings? No, give me an example. That's not possible, right? If this is true, and maybe we're defining things differently. We could talk about that. We do have to squint away the ambiguities in our words, right? I already said that. If that's true, then that's definitely false, right? That's the contradictory relationship at work there. But it makes sense, right? Even with our examples, it makes sense. And looking at the Venn diagrams too, right? The shading is empty space. The X says there's something there. If this is empty space, then there's nothing there. There can't be something there, right? So that makes sense. Okay, now what about our E statement? No genocides are ethnic cleansings. Now, just with the content, we know that's going to be false. But look, hey, if this is true, and we're not talking about empty categories, if this is true, well, both of these can't be true at the same time unless we have an empty category, S being an empty category. So if this one's true, this one has to be false. Which we could also have figured out along this direction. Hey, if it's false that some genocides are not ethnic cleansings, then that false climbs, right? True falls, false climbs, right? So unless it's an empty category, unless P is an empty category, we're not going to have this being false while this is true. It's not going to work. Now our I statement, we can come at it any number of ways. If E is false, well, I's got to be true. Yeah, we got that. Down here, the subcontraries, hey, look, the subcontraries relationship says they can't both be false when we're assuming existential import. So this one being false, it's going to require that that one's true. Or the subalternate relationship, right? If all of these are like this, then some are. Now, we've had a little bit of debate. I've had a little bit of debate recently. Are all ethnic cleansings genocides? This is kind of a tricky one, right? Because ethnic cleansing, so I think that there's at least conceptual space. First, let me say, genocide is clearly an example of an evil action, an evil policy, an evil historical events, evil, histories now too, by the way. Ethnic cleansing, I'm also saying bad, right? I mean, duh, right? We're all on the same side here. Genocide is bad and ethnic cleansing is bad. So, but the question is, are there ethnic cleansings that aren't technically genocide? And I think there's room for debate here, right? There's ambiguity there. I think technically it's possible for there to be an ethnic cleansing that is not genocidal, right? It might look like mass deportation, for instance, right? What's the motivation for mass deportation? Is it, well, look, I feel like there's too many of this kind of people here, so let's cleanse them away. So, the question is, would a mass deportation be non-genocidal? And there, I think, is room for debate there, because mass deportation certainly shows a disregard for life, right? Those who are willing to, all those who are willing to commit ethnic cleansings are willing to commit genocide, right? There is a disregard for human life involved in ethnic cleansing altogether. Human life, I mean, disregard for freedom, for liberty, for, right? Well, how does it go? Endowed by our Creator, right? This is a American political document, but it's the justification it gives is universal. We hold these truths as self-evident. I hate Jefferson, by the way, but we hold these truths as self-evident that all people, is that what, okay, let's just take it for granted. We hold these truths as self-evident that all people are endowed by their Creator, not by their government, not by their constitution, endowed by their Creator with the rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Okay, liberty. I think Americans often misunderestimate the value of freedom of movement. This is a large country, and the passport that comes with it is a powerful passport. You can pretty much go anywhere. So if you're living in a tiny country and there's no opportunity, or you're living in a tiny country and there's some corrupt official that's targeting you, geez, that freedom of movement, that liberty of movement being restricted is possibly a death sentence. It's very often a death sentence. So life and liberty, particularly liberty of location, locate yourself where you want. That's a real significant freedom to restrict. There needs to be real good reasons to restrict that, not to like control, administrate that. it's not like security checkpoints are themselves always, definitely, 100% of the time, unreasonable restrictions. But closed borders, exceptionless closed borders, yeah, that's an evil policy. I hope you enjoyed this tour of the square of opposition with some emphasis on existential import.